Namaste everyone. In this series of Spring Security videos, let's dive into how we are going to implement it using the User Details Manager. So basically, Spring Security provides two ways to do that out of the box, that is in Memory User Details Manager as well as JDBC User Details Manager. We will see both of them, and we will implement it on the API with method level security. Okay, let's start. So first step is open your browser, go to Spring Initializer where we are going to create the project, right? Let's keep this thing as Gradle itself because I believe Gradle is better than map in any kind of configuration. Let's create atquil as a group. Let's give user manager as artifact. Let's keep it the same. Let's write implementation for user details manager. Let's use Java 21 and let's add some dependency. One is Lombok. Let's add Spring Web as well as the star of the show, that is the Spring Security. Once you're done with this, let's click on generate. Okay, so it will get downloaded. Now it has downloaded for me. Let's unzip it. Now open this project into your IntelliJ. Okay, so build is done. Let's start the application. Okay, we are receiving a error, uh, invalid source. Okay, okay, so you just need to whatever the version that you're using, you need to just see that like it is there or not in SDK. Let's apply it, press OK. Let's start the application again. Okay, it should run this time. Perfect, it is running. So you will see that out of the box, you are able to see some sort of password, right? And what this means is that Spring Security out of the box, if you will just go to localhost 8080, it will provide you some sort of login window, right? Which is very helpful. And by default, you have user as user and password is which is auto generated here, right? Let's use it. As we don't have any API, it is coming to this page. So let's add some API. Let's go to source, main, Java, new package. Let's add a controller. Okay, sorry, I need to add this thing in the main package, right? Okay, inside the controller, let's add user controller. Okay, let's add REST controller. Let's add request mapping, which will say that like, hey, we are just going to do with this, start with the API, right? Let's add one API, public response entity. We don't know the return type right now. Get response, and let's return response entity dot okay, and user is, let's, okay, so as we are using the Spring Security, right, you may need to represent like who is logged in, right? So for that we will get the information from the principal. So if you want to see what principal is, it is an interface which has this get name, right, which we are going to use to see that who has logged in. So by default, the Spring Security will uh, have this username and password, right, to log in. So we can access this using this principal. Okay. So let's add principal.getName. If we will start this application again, okay, sorry. If we will start this application again and go with the API, let me just remove this. It is not needed, right? Let's start this again. Okay, if I will just give this thing to API, we need to first log in, right? User and the password we need to copy it from there. Let's see. Okay, user is user, right? Let's change this user without using the user details manager. I mean, from the configuration file itself. So let's first change it to YAML file, right? And why YAML file? Because it is very easy to add the configurations in YAML file. Like I will just show you. This username and username, suppose it's atquil, and password. Let's restart. So if you will do the restart, and if you want to access, suppose again localhost 8080 with API, right? API, you will have to log in, right? So we have given atquil password. And then let's write something else as a password. You will see bad credential. Let's write correct one. So I'm getting user is atquil, right? Okay. Now the first thing is resolved. Okay, now start with in-memory UserDetailsManager, right? Let's comment it because now we have to store the user in our memory itself, right? So let's create a package called user config, because in this we will add whatever we want to for the user configuration, right? Let's create a file for user, right? User details config. Okay, now in this file we will be uh, adding the user details. Let's make it a configuration file. Now let's create a bean, um, and bean of which type? Let's create a bean of in-memory user details manager. uh, for user, let's create a bean which will have return type of new in-memory user details manager. And now let's create a user inside it, user with username at and dot with password. Okay, dot authorize. Let's give a role underscore user dot build. Let's create this user. Okay, let's test now. Is it working with the same API? Admin password. Okay, it is giving some error. It is saying that no password encoded. Okay, so with the latest Spring Boot, right, you must have to encrypt the password. Encrypt the password. So let's create, there is a way to avoid it to use like this, but let's no, like no encryption, but let's encrypt the password itself, which is the better way. Let's create a bean of what? With a bean of password encoder, password encoder. Let's create a bcrypt password encoder, password encoder. Now let's use this password encoder to encode our password. password encoder dot encode. Okay, now our password is encrypted, right? Let's restart this. Now again. Okay, now there is another error. What it is saying? PWSWRD. The same. Let's say that we want API. Okay, I don't know what happened then. Okay, so now you can see that we are able to see our user with the name @quill, right? Okay, now one more thing. How do you know that like if this thing is working or not? The user is working or not. So for this, we need to create some sort of authentication, right? User authentication. Let's go to controller. Uh, let's add a, okay, let's create a configuration, security config first. Config, new file, security config. In this, we are going to write our all the configurations, right? So enable web security and enable method level security. Let's do that. Let's add that. Let's also say that it is the part of configuration itself. Now we will have to create a bean of security filter chain. What it does is for whatever the request that you are creating, it will all come here. So let's write API security filter chain. Okay, and what kind of security we are giving for? We are giving HTTP security for any kinds of HTTP request. That is the API. It will check. Let's see. Let's do a return type of HTTP security. Uh, let's authorize all the request. Uh, yeah. So let's authorized auth any request. Whatever the request is coming, I will have to authenticate it. Okay, so let's um let's add what kind of, so see there are two kinds of login that we can have where this is giving error. Okay, add exception. Okay, there are two kinds of login, that is the HTTP login, HTTP basics with defaults. Dot build. So if you will do that, if you will see uh, what kind of login that you are getting. Let us start this. So this is the HTTP login, which nobody likes, right? So it will do the same work, but let's revert back to the firm login. Firm login with defaults. So it is better. So what it is saying that, hey, if you have firm login, then do that. If not, then do the HTTP basic login. Let's restart it. Okay, let's refresh it. Okay, @quill and password. Okay, it is coming now. So yeah, we were working for the method level security, right? Now let's, the API that we are having here, let's secure it, right? We need to secure our API. So there is one API which is open to all, right? Let's create one more API. Let's create one more API which is basically saying that like chalo, uh, a manager, uh, and this API is going to be uh, like accessed by the manager itself. So has role, has role underscore manager, get response, get response one. Let's say get response one, principal here, manager, just write manager. Okay. Here we are saying that like this API, this manager API can be accessed only by the manager only. Okay, let's see what kind of user that you have. You have role user, so it should not be able to access it. Let's restart it. So which API we want to see? API oblique manager, right? Let's log in. See, you are not able to access it. Now if I will just change it, now if I will just change the role here to, or otherwise better, let's do here, um, as role this, right? Okay, so let's make it manager. If I have this, change this, hit this role at control to manager, let's see if I am able to access it or not. So let's, so I'm able to access it, right? Okay. So I believe you must have understood now how in-memory user details manager works, right? So with this, let's quickly jump into the other part where we are going to use JDBC user details manager. Okay. So for JDBC user details manager, we need to create a table, right? And we need to store our user details there. Okay, so for that we need to add few dependencies. Like we had only few dependencies, right? We also need dependency called JPA, and we also need a dependency for S2 database. Like what kind of database we are using? S2 database. Let's see how we can add that. So I will just copy it from here. That is the S2 database is runtime. Okay, let's go to Gradle. You can do the same for database, this for Maven as well. So, and the other one was JPA, right? So I will just copy it and paste it here, and I will also see where the security is. Security, for Spring Security we have this, right? These are the two main that we have. Let's load it. In the meantime, I will just show you if you are doing it Maven, then how it will look like, right? You can just copy it and paste it from here. Okay, so now it's loaded. Okay, it's looking pretty good. It is commented. Now in user controls, let's user details config. Let's comment this out and let's start with JDBC user details manager. Okay, it means that we are going to store something user details in JDBC. Okay, let's create a table now. Let's create a bean of embedded data source. Like what kind of database data source that we are using? We are going to use embedded database of S2 database, right? It is the easiest. Like you can definitely configure anything, right? You can configure Postgres or something else, but let's start with this as it is quicker to build. Okay, now let's set type. What kind of database we are using? We have already selected embedded data source type S2, right? Let's give the name for this. What is the name? SQL DB. We are going to use SQL DB. What else? Let's add a script which will basically create the table for us of user and authorities that we are going to need, right? So default user details, not JDBC, add a script JDBC. Now implementation dot uh, default user schema, default user schema, this thing we need, and let's build it. Okay, let's see. This default schema will create a table for the user where you can store username and password, and it will also create a table for getting the authorities. Okay, you can see here authorities. So if you want, you can dive deep into it. Okay, there are a few little things as well here. So now let's start with yeah, now we have this database here. Now let's create the user. Okay, user to be inserted in our database. Let's create a bean for what? JDBC, user details manager, user details manager. Let's use a data source. Now let's return the details, JDBC user details, which can be accessed, right? So before this, let's also create the user only, right? User details is equal to user dot builder. Let's create the user, right, with the username. Suppose let's create a user with manager. Let's create a password and let's copy this itself. Okay, because here also we are encoding using the bicrypt password. Let's create a role and let's create a role called manager. So by default, here in user details manager, we have to give a prefix of role underscore, right? Here, no need to give. It will automatically get DBC user details manager. It will automatically give. So in database, yeah, table database, you will say it as role underscore manager. Okay. Now you have all three of them. Let's build this user. Let's also build user details for you. It is a manager, right? Manager. It also made one more user, which is called admin. And we are going to use it to see that like uh, how access is working and give its role as admin. Now let's add both to the JDBC to the database. It's equal to new JDBC user details manager. Let's use the data source. Okay, JDBC user details manager dot create user. Let's add manager. Same thing. Let's add in this dot create user. Let's add admin, right? Now let's just return JDBC user details manager. So if I will restart it, I can access the API using manager and admin both. Let's go to user controller to see this manager. Let's create one more API. This API will be accessed by both. So as suppose let's make this thing to as any role so that like manager can also access it and admin can also access it. Okay, let's make response to admin, because admin should have access to everything, right? Uh, as role manager, role admin. So here only admin has access. So let's restart. Okay, let's hope nothing breaks down. Okay, let's test with the manager API. Let's first test with the admin. Let's see who can access it. ADMN. So admin. Okay. Why admin is not able to access it? Let's check. Uh, Role admin. ADMIN. Spelling is correct. User details manager. Role is ADMIN. PAWRD security config user controller. Okay. Role admin. Okay. This is explicit no error mapping. Let's try with manager. Okay, let's log out first. Okay, so I didn't tell you, but logout is also there. Uh, for by default in the form login, logout is also there. Manager. So let's see what API. Okay, why we are not able to access it? Hmm. Let's see that, like, if we are able to add the user or not. Okay, I mean in S2 console, if we are able to see the users or not. So checking that, let's try with S2 console. Okay, let's see. For making it visual, we have to do some configuration. Let's go to security config. Okay, we have this thing here, right? We have to modify it. We have to modify uh, so that we can see the so that we can see our S2 console. So let's add some configuration here. Let's add request matcher, and for the and path request matcher dot and matcher for the S2 S2 console. Um, so here we are saying that for any kind of request which is of type S2 console, let's permit all, so that we don't need to log in again and again to waste our time, right? And for any other request, let's authenticate it. One more thing that we need to add, we need to stop, we need to basically ignore the cross-site request forgery for our S2 console. So and it should be enabled for everything else, because it is very important, right? But for some tools like S2 console, uh, it creates trouble. So let's ignore ant matcher and path matcher dot ant matcher, same S2 console, S2 console star star. One more thing, we need to also see the frame basically is like the window in which these two console appears in. So we need to also enable that. So let's do headers. So headers dot frame options, frame options with defaults, and we just need to disable so that we will be able to see now the h2 console. Let's restart it. Let's see user control pre-authorize the I'm just confirming that if everything is fine or not. User role manager, blah blah blah. Get response to everything looks correct. Let's restart the application. Okay. Let's see h2 console. Let's just see h2 console. Why? Why it is not working? Mhm. Okay, security config, HTTP request. Okay, enable method configuration, permit all, CSRF. It should work. Why nothing is working? Hmm. Let's. Oh, okay. API manager. Okay, okay. Yeah. Sorry. H2 console. Okay. So I understood now. Okay, so I that was my mistake, right? Uh, Here also this thing is missing. Let's restart everything again. Okay, now okay, so let's test with the API first. Let's test with the API admin, right? I was missing this API part. So let's start with the admin. Let's see if we are able to log in or not. Like, I mean, see the API or not. So let's start with API ADM and admin. Let's use admin password. So we are able to see. Now let's see if I'm able to see manager or not. So I'm able to see, right? And by default this API is there. In not API R. Okay, so I'm able to see all three of them. Let's log out. Let's log out and let's log in as manager. Now let's see what are the things that we will be able to access. API, let's see simple API, yes. Let's see manager. Okay, I'm able to say it. Let's see if I'm able to access admin or not. No, right? So in this way we are securing our APIs that only manager is able to access this API. So manager and admin, only admin can access this and everybody can access this, right? Okay, so one more thing was pending to see this H2 console, right? So the thing that we were missing was basically we need to enable the H2 console here. So let's try it. H2 console enabled spring dot cons spring H2 console enabled true. If we will write that now, if I will just restart this application, you will see that I will be able to go here, test connection, connect, and now you can see both the users, right? So admin and user. If you will go to the authorities, if you will run this, let me just clear it. Authorities run, you will see there are two roles also there in this table, right? So in this way, you now understood that how we are going to create the API, how we are going to secure it, how we are going to make a method level security, how JDBC user details manager work, how in-memory user details manager work, how you can even configure the user details from the properties files, how you can see the S2 console, how you are able to configure the security config so that you don't need to log in to see the S2 console, but for all the other API should be secured. So with this, I believe we can end this. In upcoming videos, we will see how we can use JPA, how we will use JWT, how we will use login, octalogin, etc. and etc. Okay. See you guys in next video. Bye. This, I believe we can end this. In upcoming videos, we will see how we can use JPA, how we will use JWT, how we will use login, octalogin, etc. and etc. Okay. See you guys in next video. Bye.